Chilean miner's rescue story, a tale of hope and resilience. The story of the 33 Chilean miners is an astonishing account of hope, resilience, and unity in the face of darkness and despair. This incredible event unfolded in 2010 at the San José Mine in Chile, capturing the attention of the entire world. The San José Mine, life deep within the earth. The San José Mine is located in the heart of Chile's deserts, a place where the miners are virtually the only living souls. They are brought to this remote area by bus and truck from various parts of Chile to work in the gold and copper mines. Working conditions are incredibly harsh, with occasional explosions that claim lives. The miners are generally religious, carrying prayer beads, and despite the risks, they earn good wages, roughly 3 times the basic salary in Chile. They work 7 days a week with 12-hour shifts. Their system involves being transported by bus to the nearest town, where they stay in dormitories for 7 nights, commuting daily to and from the mine. The San José Mine is approximately as deep as the tallest building on Earth, requiring a 6-kilometer journey to reach its lowest point. Active since the late 19th century, the mine has expanded over the years with an intricate network of galleries and tunnels, resembling an underground city. Temperatures fluctuate, and various breezes flow through it. The main route is called rampe, the moment of disaster, an earthquake in the mountain's heart. On the morning of August 5, 2010, the night shift was preparing to leave. Miners, drenched in sweat and dust, gathered in one of the tunnels, awaiting the truck. Throughout their shift, they had felt the ground shake several times, like massive rocks, rumbling and groaning. They called these sounds the mine crying and groaning. But this time, it was different. Around 1 p.m., Franklin, a 52-year-old truck driver, and Jorge, a seasoned 56-year-old miner who had repeatedly complained about safety issues to the mine management, were gathering workers for lunch. The mine had been shut down once before in 2007 after a geologist died, but it was reopened with promises of reforms, many of which were never implemented. Franklin, a former local football celebrity who worked in the mine to pay for his daughter's college education, was driving through the dark, dusty tunnel when a white shadow suddenly darted across his windshield. The massive collapse, a 700,000-ton boulder falls. What the miners later recounted was a terrifying roar, as if a skyscraper had collapsed behind them. The mine's intricate internal architecture, expanded over a century, had given way to the fall of a gigantic granite boulder, as tall as a 45-story building. This rock had detached from the mountain and was plummeting through various layers of the mine, crushing parts of the rampe. At level 150, a 40-year-old miner who had survived a tsunami and earthquake in his hometown 5 months earlier, instinctively dove under a loader upon hearing the strange sounds. Beside him, Richard, 26, who was due to become a father in 3 months, did the same. After the explosion, one of the vehicles was half buried under rocks. At level 150, workers heard an unusual sound, and minutes later, a violent gust of wind swept a massive cloud of dust from abandoned tunnels toward them. They fled the barrage of dust and rocks, running towards the shelter. The shelter was a cavern-like space with fireproof brick flooring, originally built for emergencies but commonly used as a rest area. Within minutes, 24 to 25 miners from different areas reached the shelter. The mountain continued to groan. The foreman and shift supervisor also made it to the shelter. Carlos, a 24-year-old Bolivian immigrant on his first day at the mine, who had just passed his loader test, jumped into a loader and attempted to drive out. Suddenly, a blast of hot air hit his face, and he felt his head swell like a balloon, as if it would burst. Visibility was extremely poor, and the sound of falling rock was so terrifying that the walls seemed ready to crumble at any moment. The men in the shelter tried to escape on foot twice, but each time the mountain hurled rocks of all sizes at them. The foreman, driving his Toyota Hilux, tried to gather the remaining miners from various levels. Eventually, they reached the workshop level and picked up Sanfredigo. As they continued, they reached the service truck, which was closest to the center of the explosion. When they shone their lights on the service truck driver, who had been looking for them, they saw his face was pale with terror. They continued along the route until they encountered so many rocks and boulders that further progress was impossible. They disembarked and walked about 50-60 meters before hitting a wall. With their headlamps, they saw an enormous grayish-blue rock that had completely blocked the rampa. It was later determined to weigh around 700,000 tons, having broken off the mountain in a single piece. Some experienced miners estimated it had destroyed 10 levels of the ramp, an estimation that later proved correct. Initial hopes and bitter truth. Initially, 32 miners were counted, later confirmed to be 33. One had managed to escape. A team of 4 went to find an escape route but found none. The rest returned to the shelter. Florencio, the foreman and the second in command after the shift supervisor, told one of the most experienced miners, "When you get to the shelter, don't let the kids touch the food supply. We might be here for a few days." Upon reaching the shelter, they discovered that all communication with the surface was cut off. No water, no air, no electricity, no telephone. Despite this, some still hoped for a quick rescue. To conserve their headlamp batteries, they turned them off. The group that had gone to find an escape route explored the vertical shafts, which are usually used for emergencies. These shafts, electrical and ventilation, theoretically should have allowed them to bypass the rockfall, but climbing was extremely difficult due to the high humidity and intense heat. They climbed as high as they could, only to find the rockfall still blocking their path. One of them later recalled, "It was at this point that I realized it was over for us, especially when we reached the next shaft and there wasn't even a ladder." They decided to tell the others the truth. "From now on, we practically just have to wait for rescuers." This was the harsh reality for miners. Sometimes they were buried alive or starved to death, and their bodies were often never found. Leadership in crisis and dwindling resources. Arazuha, the shift supervisor, was consumed by despair, sitting in the front seat of the pickup with his eyes closed. But Sepulveda, despite having no high rank in the mine hierarchy, decided to step forward and take charge, driven by his fighting spirit and hard life. The miners gathered to access the food. There was only enough food for 8 hours, but most hadn't eaten since the night before and were ravenous. Some suggested waiting for the supervisor to return, but the majority decided against it. They used screwdrivers to try and pry open the cabinet hinges. Eventually, the person with the key brought it forward, saying, "Fighting is useless. If all of you want to eat, here's the key." They opened and ate several boxes of biscuits and a few cartons of milk. When the team sent to find an escape route returned, they said, "With what you've eaten, we could all have lasted a few more days." They explained the dire situation and emphasized that the only way to survive was to be strong, organized, and united. Arazuha took off his white safety helmet, symbolizing his authority, and declared, "In these circumstances, we are all equal. There is no longer a boss or subordinate." They inventoried the remaining food: 1 can of fish, 1 can of fruit preserve, 1 can of green peas, 18 cans of tuna, 24 liters of milk, 8 of which were spoiled, 93 packs of biscuits, 40 plastic forks and spoons, and only 10 liters of water. If each person ate 1 or 2 biscuits and a spoonful of tuna, they would likely have food for about a week. There was a large tank in the mine with thousands of liters of water, but it was used for cooling machinery and contained oil, making it undrinkable. They locked the food in cabinets. Arazuha counted them and announced, "We are 33. One miner shouted, 33, San Esa Masi, Saint Jesus Christ. Others repeated it. This became a significant symbol, even for those who were not particularly religious. Hours slowly passed. Everyone sought a corner to sleep. Empty cardboard boxes, plastic explosives, anything they could find, served as pillows or mats. The shelter had a food cabinet, a first aid kit, a torn-out picture of a naked woman, and a thermometer that read 29.5 degrees Celsius that night. Battling despair and hunger. Induced hallucinations. One of the miners later recounted feeling utterly hopeless, believing that was his last chance to say goodbye to his family. He walked alone in the tunnel, reflecting that despite all the rocks and debris, none of them had died, which changed his mindset. He decided to be strong and pray. Meanwhile, 5 or 6 miners walked towards the top of the ramp to see if any sound came from above, and if they could, send a signal. But they found nothing and returned. At level 180, at the bottom of the shaft they had climbed, they lit a fire, hoping the smoke would serve as a signal, but it merely circled around them. One of them attempted to clear the path with a loader, but realized it would only cause more rockfalls. They tried to build a ladder from rebar and hoses, but it was impractical with their tools. Then they attacked the rock with a drill, but to no avail. Finally, they gave up, turned off their lights, and listened in silence, hoping to hear something from the surface. Hard days and a food miracle. At noon on the second day, Sepulveda lined up 33 plastic cups. He put a spoonful of fish in each, added a little water, placed 2 biscuits on top, and handed them out, saying, "Gentlemen, enjoy your meal. This is your delicious food for today." This meal likely contained less than 300 calories. In the first few days, the mountain shook several more times. Some miners slept anxiously outside the shelter, rushing inside at every sound. Everyone was covered in dust, and the shelter developed a foul odor after a few days. They had no water for personal hygiene. Their drinking water ran out on the first day, and from the second day, they began drinking the non-potable water, which was used for cooling machinery and contained oil. Hunger was agonizing in the initial days. Empty stomachs felt like they were being squeezed. Victor, another miner, began writing daily notes on forms he found in his vehicle. On the second day, he wrote, "We are very weak. We have no news from outside. We don't know if anyone is coming to rescue us." He wrote to his daughters, "Children, my work is done. I am very weak and very hungry. I feel like my mind is fading." Sepulveda, who was ill-tempered and prone to mood swings, one day suddenly yelled that he wanted to pray. He declared angrily, "I'm very angry, and I'm powerless. Whoever wants to pray, come gather around me." He called Jose and said, "We know you are a devout Christian. You come and pray for us." Failed attempts and a new glimmer of hope. On the third day, they decided to make soup. They went to level 105, where there was still some airflow. They inverted a truck's cover and used it as their pot. One of them had a mobile phone and managed to record a video. The audio on the video said, "Peas and tuna, 8 liters of water, a can of tuna, a few peas." The blurry video showed shirtless men gathered around a fire, and someone said, "We are true Chileans, and today we're going to eat soup." The next day, after prayer and distributing food, arguments broke out among them. One suggested, "We should sue the mine owner and demand compensation." Another said, "We must swear to remain silent after we get out. Don't tell anyone except our lawyers. This way we can get more money." These discussions, while they were still trapped, were disturbing for some. Victor noted in his diary, "The drilling work is progressing slowly. I want to be strong, but I'm really reaching the end of my rope." By this point, they had survived for about a week without a decent meal and with no hopeful prospects. One day, Jose recounted the miracle of Jesus' loaves and fishes and prayed, "God, bless this little food of ours too." After the prayer, some rummaged through empty tuna cans and other trash, even fruit peels discarded on the first day, hoping to find something to eat. Physical and spiritual erosion, and the miracle of connection. They gradually grew weaker. The water tank was leaking, turning the path muddy and making walking increasingly difficult. Victor wrote in his diary, "At 10:25, the drill stopped again. I don't know what's happening. Why aren't they coming?" The next day, he wrote, "No one says anything here anymore." The day after, he wrote, "Our skin is clinging to our bones. Our ribs are protruding. Our legs tremble when we walk." The drill's sound, after several interruptions, eventually grew closer one day, and they prepared for rescue. They found a can of red spray paint and said, "If the drill comes out, we'll paint it so those up there know we're here." One remembered that in any rescue message, 3 things should be written: how many of them there were, where they were, and their condition. Another had a wrench that he planned to bang on the drill when it emerged, so the sound would reach the surface. A day passed, and the sound that had grown so close began to fade again. It turned out they hadn't been found, and the drill had passed over them. They became despondent again. Now, they were eating one biscuit every other day, meaning they were getting only about 160 calories daily. After 2 weeks, those who were thin had lost significant muscle mass. Their dreams became longer and more vivid, and they slept to escape the sensation of hunger. Some were very careful to prevent anyone from throwing themselves into one of the mine shafts. They had had near-death experiences. They ate every other day, and their dessert was a tiny piece of preserve, divided into 33 parts, each no bigger than a fingernail. They were literally dying of weakness before each other's eyes. Their confession and absolution sessions became longer and longer. Renewed hope and the final battle Vega, one of the smallest and weakest among them, stepped forward one day. The supervisor turned to one of the experienced miners and said, "He wants food now. What do we do?" He replied, "We don't have extra food, but I can give him some of my portion today." Then he said, "We'll be here for a while. One drill missed us. The next one might suffer the same fate. Let's not eat today. This way, we'll last one more day." At first, some protested and grumbled, but then they saw that the thinnest person in the group had come forward and prioritized the group's needs over his own clear personal desire. They joined him, and not only did they eat nothing that day, but they ate nothing for 3 consecutive days. They reached a point where every time they fell asleep, they might not wake up. Most of them wrote wills, as it was uncertain how much longer they would have the strength to write. Many needed help to stand or sit. Witnessing each other's crying only worsened their spirits. One day, Sepulveda saw that one of them was lying down in a bad state and hadn't moved from the ground in a long time. He said, "Get up, you son of a bitch, you're going to die. You're going to die, and we'll eat you." This might sound like a joke, but when you have dozens of people who haven't eaten for 2 weeks, such a threat takes on a different meaning. The man stood up, swaying as he struggled to stand for the first time, but he stood. These young men had each lost up to 10 kilograms. One day, Victor asked, "What is death like?" Sepulveda turned to him and said, "It's like sleeping. We close our eyes and don't worry about anything anymore." On the morning of August 22nd, they awoke again to the sound of the drill. The workers above had been toiling all night. A little further away, hundreds of family members had gathered. Different teams had been working tirelessly for 2 weeks. The worker on top of the drill had started his shift at 10 p.m. the night before. His foot was on the platform, as he could feel the vibrations and understand what was happening below. At 5 a.m., he realized the drill bit had hit rock bottom. There was no smoke, and his pressure gauge dropped. 700 meters below, above the shelter, a small explosion caught everyone's attention. Then a piece of rock fell to the ground. The sound of rock being cut by metal ceased, and the whistling sound of air taking its place. Richard grabbed his wrench and ran towards the sound. He saw a piece of the drill emerging from a crack between the ceiling and the wall, moving up and down. Those above had also realized they had reached an empty space. They guided the drill slowly until it reached the floor. Richard began to bang on the drill with his meter-long wrench. After a few blows, he was told to think more carefully, lest the blows worsen the crack. Very soon, all 33 gathered there. They embraced each other, crying, as if a hand had reached down from above to pull them out. They brought the spray paint and marked the drill. They attached the notes they had written, personal notes and wills, to the drill with plastic and wire. 4 hours after the drill entered, it began to ascend. The crucial 7-word message was also hidden inside a plastic package behind a hammer. Underground celebration and unwanted fame. Then they gathered to celebrate. They filmed with the same mobile phone. They passed a plastic bottle of dirty water among themselves, as if it were champagne, drinking from it, celebrating, and singing the national anthem. They began singing the national anthem with energy and excitement, but as they reached the final lines, their voices gradually faded, as they had no strength left. Hours later, when the entire drill was pulled out and cleaned, the Chilean Minister of Mining, who was at the site, pointed to a red stain and asked, "Was that there before?" They said, "No, it's new." Then they found the papers. They read a few and realized they were personal letters and should be kept. Someone tried to take a piece of plastic as a souvenir and discovered a paper inside. He pulled out the rescue note and shouted, "These children are all alive! All 33 of them are alive!" Now it was time for those on the surface to celebrate and dance. Some of the workers ran towards the family camp, which was separated from the drilling site by several security fences. They went to where the media cameras and small areas for prayer and vows were. Now a 7-centimeter hole was open. A probe with a camera was sent down. Then a telephone was lowered so they could hear their voices. In the following hours, small glucose bottles, and in the following days, drinking water, protein drinks, then fruits and proteins were delivered to them, based on NASA's advice, slowly and gradually. For their rescue, they began drilling a 75-centimeter shaft near the workshop and were told that the rescue operation would probably take another 4 months. Victor wrote, "Now we are just waiting for a hand to bring us food, and we know how an animal feels in a cage." The mountain still occasionally made noises, and the risk of further collapse and reburial remained. A small television was also sent down to them. Through the TV programs, they learned that they had become famous. The Dominican government had invited all of them and their families to a resort for recreation. At first, it was a surreal experience for them, but like any surreal experience, it gradually became normal. Division and a spiritual battle. Some people started collecting money for their families. The sudden influx of fame and wealth below ground led to arguments and conflicts among them. The media went to interview their families. Sepulveda had written a letter to his son claiming, "I'm in charge of everything here." When this was revealed and the news reached below, the miners split into 2 groups, his supporters and his opponents. No one attended prayer services anymore. They boycotted the prayers. Sepulveda said, "Greed and covetousness are destroying the brotherhood between us." On the 37th day, Sepulveda went into a cave to pray. He prayed for God's mercy and for them to be as close as before. He said he felt the presence of an evil thing at that moment. When he returned to the others, his face and body were covered in mud, as if he had wrestled in it. They asked, "What happened?" He said, "I was fighting the devil." This became another talking point among them, and after their rescue, he gained media fame, becoming a public figure and going into advertising. Final release and the return to life. Finally, on October 13, 2010, the rescue operation began. The younger and stronger miners were the first to board the rescue capsule, so that if anything unexpected happened on the way, there would be someone capable of handling the problem. Then one by one they came up, travel, interviews, fame, awards. Most of them stayed home for a year. Many had more or less lost their emotions. Some later complained that no one asked how they were doing and only wanted to borrow money. Many of the older ones retired. Most of the others took related jobs on the surface and did not return underground. A few did return underground. Vega, the weakest of them all, who had suggested not eating for a day, struggled with fear and nightmares for a long time. Every time he remembered the hunger underground, his hands would start shaking, and then his whole body would tremble. Finally, he decided to confront his fear by going back to work in the mine. One day, he met his brother-in-law, got into his pickup truck, and went back to the San José Mine.